again, welcome folks. As far as history goes, I always start my history at the beginning. At least as far as the beginning of Florida, where the Europeans are concerned. And Florida was discovered and named by Ponce de Leon, which most people know that. What a lot of people don't know is that Juan Ponce de Leon was a shipmate of Christopher Columbus on Christopher Columbus's second trip to the New World. But Christopher Columbus never set foot in the mainland of the United States. He actually made landfall in the Bahamas, eventually making his way down to and settling in the Dominican Republic and Haiti, docked up, otherwise known as the island of Hispaniola. And with the island of Hispaniola's close proximity to Puerto Rico, Ponce de Leon became the first governor of Puerto Rico. After his governorship ended, he decided to search out the islands throughout the Bahamas, simply looking for other islands to explore and to settle, not really looking for the Fountain of Youth. But in searching out the islands, he sighted the Florida coast around what is present day Cape Canaveral, they believe, on Easter Sunday in 1513. Now, the Easter season in Spain was called Pascua Florida, meaning Festival of Flowers. So he named the land La Florida, or Land of Flowers, in honor of the Easter season. He came ashore and he claimed the land in the name of the King and Queen of Spain, but then he left. Didn't do anything with it on there. He simply went back to Puerto Rico and sent word to the King and Queen, saying there's more land out here besides the islands. After which, there were several attempts by the Spanish, the French, and the British to establish foothold too in Florida, but none of them lasted. At least not until 1565, when Pedro Menendez came out here. Pedro Menendez, when he came out here, sighted the Florida coast for the first time here, off St. Augustine, on August 28, 1565, which is the feast day of St. Augustine. So he named this area St. Augustine in honor of St. Augustine. Doc, yep. Pardon, guys. I walk. Pedro Menendez came ashore a few days later, however, on September 8, 1565, to start building the town of St. Augustine, but the fort that Pedro Menendez built was made out of wood. There were actually 9 forts on this location over here, prior to the Castillo de San Marcos being built. All 9 made out of wood, and all 9 subsequently destroyed, due to the wet weather of Florida, termites, and various battles throughout the year. After the last wooden fort was destroyed in 1668, then he raided by British pirate Robert Searles, and decided enough was enough, they built one out of stone. Why it took him 9 times to figure that out, your guess is as good as mine. But that being said, using coquina, he started building this one in 1672, and finished it in 1695. It took him 23 years to build this fort, which technically is a castle. The Castillo de San Marcos means the castle of St. Mark in Spanish. We call it the fort, which is technically a castle because it has a moat and a drawbridge. A dry moat, but a moat nonetheless. But again, most people call it fort. Coquina is a sedimentary deposit of limestone mixed with fossilized shell that was quarried off of Anastasia Island over there. When carved out of the ground, coquina was soft and shapeable by the use of hand saws, chisels, and spades. But when you expose it to the air and sunlight for a few months to a few years, it hardened into concrete-like substance that you see now. The great thing about coquina was that in this state, it absorbed the impact of a cannonball really well. They didn't have explosive rounds back in those days yet, and an iron cannonball that would rip through a wooden fort would hit the coquina wall of this fort and fall straight to the ground. Or even sometimes it would stick into the solid wall and stay there, without shattering or crumbling the coquina wall in both scenarios. At night, after bombardment, soldiers would come out, gather up all the cannonballs shot at them during the day, heat them up into the hot shot oven, reshipping them back into cannonballs, and the next day, ship them back in the same ship shot to begin with, recycling its finest. It is said that at least half the ships sunk in the inlet were done so with their own cannonballs. Along with another military object the Spanish used to use that they're in the inlet to sink ships with, that I'll be talking about later on the ride, we'll point out a replica of that military object. Another thing Spanish used to do, did you notice the patches of white plaster over here on the south side of the fort still? Put the white plaster and the cracks over here on the west side as well. A little bit of red in that turret, and that turret over there. Spanish plastered the entire fort white with red turrets to match their flag. What is white with a red cross? When a cannonball would hit that wall, whether it stuck or fell out, they would put a hole in that plaster to expose the coquina underneath. When they were gathering the cannonballs at night, the Spanish would re-plaster over all those holes, so that this is the next day, it looked as if the fort had been touched. There's somebody sitting out there on the ship the next day with a spyglass looking at the fort going, I swear, I've heard 5 times a day. What the heck? It's psychological warfare. After it was completed in 1695, the fort was besieged twice for the British and never taken in battle. Once in 1702 by Governor James Moore of the British colony of the Carolinas, and again in 1740 by Governor James Oglethorpe of the British colony of Georgia. In both cases, they could not take the fort. But in 1702, in his frustration, Governor James Moore burned the town before he left. The Spanish and the British did not get along back in those days. From what I understand, nobody got along with the British back in those days. They were always trying to conquer or oppress somebody back then. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Colonize, politically correct term. After burning the town though in 1702, the Spanish decided to put a wall around the city to help protect the city. On the north side up here, running east and west, called the Kubo line, it would meet up with the Rosario line on the west side, running north and south. The wall you see over there on the right-hand side is recreation to show you what he looked like outside. The only way in and out of the city through that wall is through the city gates over here on the left-hand side, but they too were originally made out of wood. The coquina towers and coquina reinforced walls that you see now weren't built until 100 years later in 1808 during the Second Spanish period. So what you see over there are original as they were built. They were not the first city gates that were there for the original wall. And they too were plastered white with red caps to match the fort. Moving ahead a few years, the cemetery over here on the right-hand side was established in 1821. Called the Huguenot Cemetery, it was established because in 1821, an outbreak of yellow fever killed 1/3 of the town. And if you weren't Catholic, you couldn't be buried in the Catholic cemetery. The Talamado Cemetery will be seen in a couple minutes around the corner up here. So they established the Huguenot Cemetery outside the city gates for all the non-Catholics. It was named after the Huguenots, which was a group of French Protestants coming out of France in the 1500s to avoid religious persecution. This didn't work out well for them at all. It was one of the first things Pedro Menendez was supposed to do on arrival in 1565 was kill off any non-Catholics in the area. So the last of the Huguenots in the area died in 1565 at the hands of Pedro Menendez. And a massacre off the Anastasia Island back there at the south end of Matanzas Inlet. Where you get the name Matanzas Inlet and Matanzas River. Matanzas being the Spanish word for massacre or slaughter. Well, that being said, since that happened in 1565, this was established in 1821. There aren't any actual Huguenots buried in the Huguenot Cemetery. There's a non-Catholic association with it, but the nickname the Huguenot Cemetery, and that nickname has just persisted till this day. Sorry. The term Huguenot is actually pronounced Huguenot because it's a French word, the T at the end is silent, but Americans never pronounce anything correctly. For instance, Doc up here has a Belgian draft horse, which is a heavy draft horse like a Clydesdale, which are different breeds from different parts of the world. Clydesdales originated out of Scotland. Belgians, of course, came from Belgium. There's also a Shire out of England and a Percheron from France. Well, the Percheron breed originated from the La Perche River Valley in Normandy, France, so they're actually pronounced Percheron, but the Americans never pronounced that ring either. This here is one of the love trees in the area. They say if you kiss underneath one of the love trees, your love's supposed to last forever. And these branches here are part of this one, so technically we are underneath it. Doc's book is a combination of a palm tree growing on the center of an oak tree. I'll explain later about the history behind the love trees and why they're called the love trees. In the meantime, the Catholic cemetery I mentioned earlier is on the right-hand side now. Established in 1777 by the Menorcans of the failed New Smyrna colony, it was called the Talamado Cemetery because the Indian village of Talamado that sat upon it prior to becoming a cemetery. You notice a lot of the graves on top of the ground under by either the Spanish, the Second Spanish period, or by its Americans, the territorial period and statehood period. Remember those periods of history I'm explaining later. That is, you haven't got tired of me talking about that. Now, I said the Menorcans were British subjects of Greek descent, and that they were from the failed New Smyrna colony. Their leader was Andrew Turnbull, and New Smyrna was named after Andrew Turnbull's mother-in-law's hometown of Smyrna, Greece. They were collectively known as the Menorcans because the majority of them were from the actual island of Minorca over in Greece. Not all of them, like say, some of them were from like Smyrna or other places in Greece. But the majority of them were from the actual island of Minorca, so they're just collectively known as the Menorcans. Now, if you haven't got tired of me talking yet, moving ahead again a few more years, one of the inhabitants of St. Augustine in the late 1800s, on up to 1900, was Henry Flagler. Henry Morrison Flagler was a multimillionaire and entrepreneur who was partners with John D. Rockefeller. He and John D. Rockefeller helped co-found Standard Oil, along with Rockefeller's brother William and Samuel Andrews, a chemist at the time, who was helping to perfect the oil refining process. Flagler made his initial move in the oil industry with those three gentlemen and the founding of Standard Oil, but he was a brilliant businessman in general, so he made even more millions down here in St. Augustine. We built 2 hotels as winter resorts for the ultra-rich of New England. We all know what the winters are like in New England. Although you're ultra rich, don't you just stay inside your mansion and send your servants out that can supply during the winter? Who needs to go outside on a vacation? If I had that kind of money, I'd sit in front of my huge fireplace and want to enjoy the winter. Let somebody else deal with the snow. So he made it work. He was actually really successful at it. He built 2 hotels down here along those lines. The Ponce de Leon Hotel and the Alcazar Hotel. He also built 3 different churches. And the Grace United Methodist Church on the right-hand side now was the first church of Flagler built in 1887. This one was a trade. Unfortunately, where Flagler wanted to put his Alcazar Hotel, the original Methodist Church sat. So he agreed to build in the church here in exchange for property over there so he could build a second hotel. To be seen, it's a really slow process. It took him 4 years to build this church. But again, it's also what gives you those telltale horizontal lines that you see in a concrete wall. The vertical ones are cracks from it settling over the years, but the horizontal ones were from the actual process of pouring. If you look at it closely, you see little bits of shell in there. And people see the shells and they're like, are you sure that that's not coquina? Well, yes and no. It's not solid coquina. It is concrete. But Flagler did use ground up coquina as an aggregate for his concrete. Now, Flagler's use of the concrete with the red terracotta accents was inspired by his friend and rival, Franklin Smith, a well-known architect at the time who was pioneering the use of concrete as a building material here in the United States. Franklin Smith's personal residence, which we'll also see later on the right as well, was the first house to be built in the United States out of concrete, and it's what inspired Flagler to use the same concrete and red terracotta accents, not only for his first church there, but as you've seen in a few minutes, for his hotels as well. That top piece is supposedly one solid piece of carved terracotta lifted into place for 140 oxen, which to me doesn't seem like a whole lot of manpower considering the size of that thing. I mean, 40 oxen is nothing to sneeze at, but the thing is huge. I would love to see the scaffolding system and the block and tackle system that it took to lift that thing up there. I had a lady in my ride last year. I got her explaining all that, and she's like, how did I get the oxen up there? Her husband was so embarrassed, he literally looked at her and went, really? I don't know, right? She would love to know that she's running around at my jokes now. Yeah. But as I said, Flagler built 3 churches in the area, and we see them out of order. Well, the first church he built in 1887 is the first church that we see. However, the second church that we see is the last church of Flagler built in 1895. The yellow ancient city Baptist church was simply a gift to the Baptist community. He donated the land that it sits on and $10,000 towards its construction. A lot of money in 1895. The church is not painted yellow, it's actually yellow brick, imported from South America. It's supposed to last longer than your standard brick, which considering it looks the same today as it did when it was first built in 1895, maybe something to that. The only parts that they paint are the white trim, the white doors, the red steps, and the sections of wood painted yellow to look like the yellow brick. Now, they say that Flagler could be rather ruthless in business, but they also say that he can be very generous to those that we like, who just wish to be generous too. For instance, besides donating the land and the money for that church over there, the beautiful little house on the right-hand side now was also a gift to his land manager to say thank you to him for all of his hard work throughout the years. Flagler moved to Palm Beach area in 1900, and upon leaving, had this house built as a Christmas present / going away present. Must be nice, huh? These days, it's a church office for his next church over here. His next church over here, the Flagler Memorial Presbyterian Church, was the second church of Flagler built, and the last one that we see, as the name suggests, was built as a memorial. Flagler was the son of a Presbyterian minister, and he had this church built as a memorial to his daughter, Janie Louise Benedict, who died due to complications of childbirth, along with her child, the same year that this was built in 1889. Both Janie Louise Benedict and her daughter Marjorie are buried together in the same grave, in a white marble mausoleum on the inside of the church, alongside Flagler himself and his first wife, Mary Harkness. There is a 4th grave on the inside of the tomb that's supposed to be for his son Harry. Harry married in the family up north and wanted to be buried with his wife. So he's not here. The 4th grave inside the church is an empty grave. The church, built in a year, was patterned after the St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, Italy. Not an exact replica, but patterned after it. And built in a year, despite that same slow process of pouring, 1 layer of concrete at a time, and allowing each layer of concrete to dry before proceeding on the next layer of concrete. If you look closely, you can see some of the tail horizontal lines on the wall closer to us, and on the wall of the church as well, even when they painted over it. But remember, it took him 4 years to build that first church. This one he got done in just under a year. I said a year because he set the deadline at a year from David's daughter's death on March 25th, 1889, and hired folks at around-the-clock shifts to make sure they got done by the 1-year anniversary of her death when they came around in 1890. was actually finished up before the end of 1889. He's a good dude for all the money in the world, isn't it? And he wasn't the wealthiest man in the world, but his net worth at the time of his death in 1913 down in Palm Beach, Florida, was $60 million. A lot of money now. Forget 1915. You can go inside the church during the day and see it, and I highly recommend it if you get a chance. It's just as beautiful on the inside as is the outside. They do have services still. When they're not having services, they allow people to walk in and look around. From 11 o'clock in the morning up to 3:45 in the afternoon, Monday through Saturday, other visiting hours, or in between the services on Sundays as well. Now, they've been closing it during the whole COVID-19 shutdown, and even since the shutdown reopened up the city. But now that the governor opened up the entire state recently, I don't know if they've opened this up yet for tours or not. You'd have to come here and see. If they have it open, then you can just walk right on in. If it's closed, they'll have little A-frame signs out the front saying closed due to COVID. As I said, Flagler built 2 hotels in the area, the Ponce de Leon Hotel and the Alcazar Hotel. The Ponce de Leon Hotel, completed in 1887 and opened in 1888, became Flagler College over here in 1968. Flagler actually opened up the rooms on the back side of the hotel over here as artist studios for budding artists at the time so that they could practice their craft because they like to promote the arts. His great nephew, Lawrence Lewis Jr., was on the board of directors of the hotel in the 1960s, knew this and thought it'd be along his great uncle's wishes to have the hotel turned into a liberal arts college. So Lewis is the one who pushed for it to become the college in 1968 and actually funded most of the transition out of his own pocket. It's also the dorm over here on the left-hand side. It's called Lewis House. Now this building right here, that's an office building of some sort, but on the other side of that, there's a dorm called Lewis House, named after Lawrence Lewis Jr. There's also Lewis Auditorium directly in front of the college, just south of it down along Granada Street. Docks up as the college, that is a fully accredited 4-year liberal arts college. As a hotel, it was the first hotel to have hot and cold running water and electricity. It had electricity 5 years before the White House did. Who didn't get electricity until 1891? He was personal friends with Thomas Edison, and it was Edison himself who came up to Fort Myers to install the steam-powered DC generators for him. Underneath this smokestack you see in the distance over here coming up on the left-hand side. As I said, there were steam-powered DC generators, and this over here was the escape for the steam.
The chimney.
Howdy, folks. Hi, guys. Now, since they didn't have electric pumps for water yet back in those days, in order to provide the running water to the hotel, the 2 massive conical towers you see up here were water towers. They would maintain the water levels in the towers with hand pumps, and gravity would supply the running water throughout the pipes throughout the whole hotel. The hotel then had, and so the school nowadays has, the largest collection of Tiffany stained glass windows in the world, surrounding the dining room area of the college over here on the left-hand side, right in the center of the college. Because in its day, this is a winter resort for the ultra-rich of New England, and he spared no expense in providing accommodations. So the main body of the college over here on the left-hand side was your actual hotel itself. The library, which is passed back here on the right-hand side, is part of the college, but wasn't part of the original hotel. It was built after it became a college, so that's more modern construction, just designed in the same Spanish style. Docks up. And Flagler designed his buildings in the Spanish Renaissance style because he liked to preserve the Spanish heritage of the area, including making a replica of that military object that I was talking about out there in the inlet that the Spanish had used to sink ships with, and he used that replica as a decoration for his first hotel here. The chain you see here on the left-hand side is a replica of the chain that used to stretch across the inlet out there. The original chain would lie on the ocean floor until an enemy ship would come into port. And then they would draw it tight with oxen, who would lay just below the surface of the water, all the way across the inlet out there, and an enemy ship would rip its all apart trying to cross that chain. It would serve 2 purposes. 1, if the enemy ship didn't see the chain, didn't have to bother shooting at the enemy ship. It was going to sink anyway after it hit that chain. But 2, if the enemy ship did see the chain and they stopped on the outside of it, they gave the fort a specific distance away to shoot at those ships. Not to bother ranging their shots distance-wise either. The cannons of the fort were already set up at the perfect elevation to hit those ships on the other side of that chain. So everybody coming in the inlet to attack the fort, they didn't sink when they hit that chain. We're going to sit there on the other side of that chain, sitting in the crosshairs of the fort. So you can understand the fort was never taken in battle. And again, Flagler had a replica made of the original chain, because the original chain the Spanish had used had long since melted away by the time Flagler came around. Well, quẹt.
Đam thân nào đã kèng.
Dock, step up.
Xe nó mua đó các xe nó. Xe cái bên mua. Tộc mai giống tình xe mò thời chắc mẹ cua sòm. Xe không. Ồ, cái chộp.
Dock, step up.
Cái bắt sát. Phờ lương tùm chanh pâm một phờ lương.
Now, I mentioned earlier the Franklin Smith's personal residence was the first house built in the United States out of concrete, and that it was the inspiration for Flagler to use the same concrete red terracotta accents for his buildings. Franklin Smith's personal residence was the Villa Zoraida over here on the right-hand side, completed in 1883. It was built in the more survival style rather than the Spanish Renaissance style that Flagler used. The Villa Zoraida being a scaled-down replica of the Moorish Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain. A really scaled-down replica that supposedly is 1/10 the size of the original Alhambra Palace. You can see his telltale horizontal construction lines as well. If you look to the left of the carriage over here, there's a little cul-de-sac on the front side of the college. You can see a statue of Henry Flagler himself. Now, if you imagine him with a top hat and a monocle, which I'm told he was fond of wearing from time to time, you can see the inspiration for the Monopoly Man. Now, Flagler's Ponce de Leon Hotel over here became Flagler College in 1968 on the left-hand side. Over on the right-hand side. Over here on the right-hand side is the Alcazar Hotel. Became the Lightning Museum in 1948. This is the property that he traded the first church for. Completed in 1889, the Alcazar Hotel closed during the Great Depression. But Otto Leitner, a wealthy eccentric Chicago publisher who liked to collect Victorian-era antiques, thought it'd be a great place to house his vast collection of Victorian-era antiques. So Leitner bought it in 1947, converted it to a museum featuring his antique collection, and opened it to the public in 1948, and then turned it over to the city of St. Augustine in 1949, making it City Hall for St. Augustine these days, besides the Lightning Museum. For Franklin Smith, the middle of the Villa Zoraida back there, I said he was a pending competitor of Flagler's because he built the Casa Monaco Hotel over as well. As he was building it, Flagler poached him to buy it, but Smith wouldn't sell. Why? Flagler put all hotels across the street. In the end, however, Smith sold the hotel to Flagler anyway, years later when they came upon hard times with the money. So Flagler only built 2 hotels in the area, and it was owning all 3. In 1888, these days still operates as a hotel. Supposedly is the only hotel in the St. Augustine area to earn AAA's 4 Diamond Award. Back to some more Florida history, though. Governor's House over here coming up on the left-hand side was the capital building for St. Augustine during Spanish-held Florida. St. Augustine here was the capital of Florida, the first Spanish period. When the British took over Florida for the British period, they divided it into East Florida and West Florida. Keeping St. Augustine here as capital for East Florida, they made Pensacola the capital for West Florida. It stayed that way throughout the second Spanish period, and after we annexed West Florida a few years earlier in 1810, we purchased East Florida from the Spanish in 1821 and combined it all back into one territory. And then 1824 made Tallahassee the territorial capital, which is a point exactly equidistant between the 2 original territorial capitals of St. Augustine and Pensacola. Well, and the reason why we chose Tallahassee as the territorial capital, and they kept it as the state capital when it became a state in 1845. March 3rd, 1845, Florida actually became a state. Now, Flagler built the Methodist Church because he wanted their property for a second hotel, and the Presbyterian Church because he was Presbyterian. They also donated the bell tower for the Catholic Church. You see in the distance over here on the left-hand side. Out of the first tower, got burned in the ground accidentally. And the Catholic Church needed help in building it, so he helped them out. And the Tiffany stained glass windows for the Episcopal Church over here on the right-hand side. It was built in 1821, but it had regular windows in it. Like those Tiffany stained glass windows you see now, split open. And you contributed to all the different denominations in the area at the time, except for the Baptists. So they think that's the reason why he donated a lot of money for the Baptist Church.
The food, that one there, just
I'm sorry?
The wood single.
Yeah.
They just stand it. They just make it.
I'm assuming it's they get replaced periodically just to make sure they stay waterproof. Now, it's customary in the 1500s for all Spanish-held towns to be designed by a central plaza like this on the left-hand side, while the main streets coming off in different directions from that central plaza. San Juan, Puerto Rico, Havana, Cuba, Cartagena, Colombia, and Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic are all designed the same way. When they established St. Augustine in 1565, the very first street that they laid out in that city plan was Augustine Street here, now the oldest street in the United States. What's that image? What's that image remind you of it? That's a depiction of that chain I was telling you about. Again, now the oldest street in the United States. That's also another glaring example of why we don't pave our streets with brick anymore. Because buffer towards the end of the street, just to forewarn you. Named for Avila, Spain, was the hometown of Pedro Menendez, who founded St. Augustine. It was also called the Royal Hospital Street for a time. Big Spanish military hospital situated here at the entrance of the street. The street, as I said, was the first street that was laid out by the Spanish in 1565, making it the oldest street in the United States. But the bricks were laid by Henry Flagler. They figured a good way to help promote tourism in the area was to get rid of all the muddy streets. Because we all know what the rain is like in Florida. Now, I apologize. I don't know much about the Segui Kirby Smith out here on the right-hand side. Other than it's the St. Augustine Historical Society Research Library. And I only know that much because that sign says that right there. I could learn more about it, but it's more fun to use that joke. We have a little pit stop to make for Doc. All the horses have to come by and say hi to Miss Gale. She lets them come out, pet them on the nose, and feed them little treats. So they all know to come by and say hi to her. She used to have her own horses. She doesn't have any more, so she really misses them. This way she gets her horses fixed for the day, or we get to spoil her horse a little bit more. Just tonight. The treats, they're I don't know which one she has, but they're like the same ones. Yeah, they're compressed oats and molasses with a little bit of apple flavoring in them.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
People tell me that all the time. Yeah, Corey's a good one. They're talking about putting him and Doc together, sort of like they rotate between you and individually, or put them together as a team. Well, he's bigger on the withers, but Corey holds his head as high, if not higher, than Doc does. So he's the same height when you look at the head, but the withers is slower than Doc's is. The withers in the back.
That's good. Thank you.
These are for you guys.
Thank you.
3, 4 back there. Those are for you guys. Remember your ride around San Augustine with Joe and Doc. And our beautiful Nights of Lights, which are on, but you can't really tell right now.
Yeah.
Bài chứ, nhầm đó là anh chị là អានោះខំទៅចេញ
វារោកន្លែងស៊ី
ពីរកន្លែងឃើញមិនធ្លាប់
You don't need that many anyway, do you?
អាដៃខ្ញុំចូលក្នុងមាត់វា
គេថាវាទៅពី
មាត់នឹងមានទូចទៅប៉ុណ្ណឹង
They take forever to move around and get one system that can pull it in and out. But when they're clumsy about it as deep as this one is. I put him in his water bucket at the bayfront so he gets a little bit of water with it each time. And half the time he's knocking him out of the water bucket. I'm like, there you go, buddy. Come on. Doc step, G.
Bạn ơi, nhà bạn ăn ơi.
Oh, boy. Doc, step. Have a good night, Mr.
Bye bye. Yeah, you too.
Wasn't looking actually looking at me. My wife and I are both photographers as well, and we actually shot a wedding here at the Castillo de San Marcos about 5 years ago. A cute little bed and breakfast with a gorgeous courtyard for weddings. Small weddings mostly. Big ones not so much, but small ones, it's a gorgeous little courtyard. I've seen some other weddings in here since we're working here. Oh, they got a little Christmas tree out there now. Isn't that nice? When we were shooting a wedding at the time, we saw the horses and carriages go by, and I thought, that's a cool job. I could do that. I never thought I was going to be doing it, but here I am. It's funny how things work out sometimes. But I had lots of driving experience prior to this as far as the horses go. I actually drove the wagons in the show for 4 years. For Dolly Parton's Dixie Stampede, the dinner show down in Orlando when I was there. When the show closed in 2008, I went and drove for Disney for 4 years, including driving the 6 white ponies to Cinderella's coach for weddings and for parades. So again, I had lots of driving experience prior to this. The only thing I had to contend with as far as getting the job was learning the history. Now, being from Crescent Beach originally, we would take field trips here a lot. A lot of things I had to learn to get the job, I already knew, so I put on a job like that.
You know how to talk.
Hmm?
Oh, you talk?
Yes, and yeah, as you can tell, I've never had a problem talking. Well, part of that is I have had some acting experience in the past, so public speaking was never a problem for me. Whoa.
Chăm là cái mò phật. Rồi mò.
All right, now I said earlier that I would explain later about the history behind the love trees. Docks above, well, it's another, it's later. And there's another one where a palm tree is growing out of the center of an oak tree. From our vantage point, that one there, look at the palm tree, is on the other side of the oak tree, but it's not. If you can walk down here during the day and look at it from over there, you'll see the palm tree is growing out of the center of the oak tree, just like the one at Colonial Cemetery. Well, it's a natural growing occurrence that they found in the area here and only in this area of Florida for some reason. Docks above, they call them the love trees because they found lots of them about the area. And in the past, they tried to help promote the growth of some of the oak trees by cutting out some of the palm trees. But it always backfired. Every time they would kill a palm tree, it would kill the oak tree. So let those them alone and dump them all the love trees so they shouldn't live without each other. This is a Kenwood in here on the left-hand side. It's a nice bed and breakfast on this side of town. I hear there's a lot of wedding here as well. And I love the the way they decorate their front facade for Christmas every year. Oh, the lights are out up top. They're nice. The lights are all lit up. It's really pretty. And this here's the oldest section of town that we're getting to go through right now, as far as actual private residences go. The oldest houses you see in town are through this little stretch right here. Not too much predates these houses through here other than the fort itself, because nothing in the town predates the year 1702 other than the fort itself. Because as I said, it was completed in 1695, and the town was burned in 1702. These are all private residences, except for two more really nice bed and breakfasts over here. The yellow and maroon building here on the left-hand side is the Bayfront Marion House. Looks much nicer on the front side than it does on the back side. And up here next to it, the two white wooden buildings together make up the Westcott House. Again, it looks much nicer on the front side as well. But besides these two bed and breakfasts, all the other houses you see to the street are private residences. Even the Puello House here coming next on the left-hand side. It's not a bed and breakfast or museum, it's just private residence, but it's a really nice one and a particularly historic one as well. Made out of coquina. It's white plaster on the outside, but actually coquina underneath, just as the fort was. Built around 1812 during the Second Spanish period. You know, it's that plaque right there. How's it going, guys? Doing well, thanks. But you also notice the main body of the house here is coquina for 2 stories, while the garage here is coquina on the bottom alone and wood on top. There's a reason behind the differences, and I'm about to explain it all, so remember those. These sections here were built before the main body of the house was, before the Second Spanish period. But you can date the houses through here by the construction process as far as what period of history they were built during. Anything but completely out of wood was built during the American occupation of the town, anytime from 1821 to the present. The green one with the yellow trim on the left-hand side now is actually 1821 itself. 1840 for the next one up here. But besides these two houses here and the Puello house back there, none of the others have plaques on them to say exactly when they were built. But again, if it was built completely out of wood, it was built during the American occupation of the town. However, when the British burned the town in 1702, the Spanish rebuilt using coquina, so it wouldn't burn as easily. But the Spanish only built 1-story coquina dwellings at that time. When the British came and occupied the area for the British period later, they added 2nd stories to the existing 1st stories, but they used wood on top of the coquina. So the coquina bottoms is from the 1st Spanish period, the wooden tops is from the British period, and like that first section of the Puello house we saw back there, and the ones that we're passing on the right-hand side now, and they built completely out of coquina for 2 stories from the 2nd Spanish period. The Spanish decided to start building 2-story houses at that point, probably inspired by the British, but like using coquina all the way up. And again, anything built completely out of wood was built during the American occupation of the town, otherwise known as the territorial period, at least before Florida became a state. Before Florida became a state, it was just a U.S. territory, or similar to Puerto Rico. It's a period of history just known as the territorial period. Well, those are 4 historic periods for St. Augustine prior to statehood in chronological order. 1st Spanish period, British period, 2nd Spanish period, and then the territorial period. There was actually a 5th period of history of the state of Florida as well as a whole, before all of those, called the exploration period. If you like, when we go around the bend here in a few minutes, I'll explain all of that and why we changed hands so many times. But this is the point in the ride, what I told you earlier, you might have got tired of me talking about now. I'll leave it up to you guys. Doc, in the meantime, the St. Francis Barracks will be on the right-hand side. It was originally the St. Francis Monastery, a Franciscan mission converting local Indians to Catholicism. When the British came out for the area of the British period later, they changed it to their military headquarters and renamed it the St. Francis Barracks. When the Spanish came back for the 2nd Spanish period, they no longer needed the monastery. So they left it their military headquarters as well, and perpetuated the name the St. Francis Barracks. These days, the headquarters of the Florida National Guard, it is said the National Guard for the entire country had its beginnings here of the St. Francis Barracks, sometime shortly after our Civil War, but I don't know the details on all that. Whoa. This is such a difficult place for people to pass me, and it's not really safe, so I'll try to let people go by me right here if I can, when I see them coming. Doc, what's up? All right, so how about it, guys? You want me to continue with the different periods of history, or you want to give it a break for a little bit? Keep going? Okay, we'll do. Well, the exploration period the state of Florida began in 1513 with the discovery of Florida by Ponce de Leon. It ended in 1565, the establishment of St. Augustine here, which ended the exploration period in Florida, began the first Spanish period. The first Spanish period ended after the French and Indian War, the British fighting the French. The Spanish hated the British, so what happened? The French fight the British. During the French and Indian War, the British took Havana, Cuba. In order to get it back, the Spanish gave the British Florida as a trade during the First Treaty of Paris in 1763, ending the first Spanish period and beginning the British period, which lasted around our Revolutionary War. Since the Spanish still hated the British, they continued to help us fight them as well. When we won our independence, in order to say thank you for their involvement in the Revolutionary War, we give the Spanish back Florida during the Second Treaty of Paris in 1780. The British period only lasted 20 years. At the end of the British period, and began the second Spanish period. We kept it as divided in East Florida and West Florida like the British had established, which ended in 1821 when we purchased East Florida from the Spanish. Like I said before, we'd already annexed West Florida earlier in 1810 because there was some border disputes going back and forth between the Spanish, the French, and us at the time. And in 1810, after some of the border disputes got heated, we maintained that West Florida got included in the Louisiana Purchase that we'd attained 7 years before in 1803. Nobody argued the point in 1810, so we annexed West Florida. But again, the territorial period didn't officially begin until 1821, with us purchasing East Florida from Spain and combining them back into one territory. Not by giving Spain itself money, but by paying off about $5 million of debt to the Spanish crown owed its citizens here in Florida. A debt which they apparently acquired by offering settling bonuses to any of its citizens who want to go from the mainland of Spain over to Florida to help settle Florida. I said back there that the establishment of St. Augustine here ended the exploration periods in Florida, began the first Spanish period, because we were the first continuously occupied European and Spanish settlement here in Florida. There were other settlements before St. Augustine, but none of them lasted. For instance, Pensacola was originally founded in 1559, 6 years before St. Augustine was. But a hurricane hit the year that was so bad, it utterly destroyed the city. So they abandoned the city that year, and later on, when the French started exploring around and settling in the Mississippi River Valley over there, the Spanish reestablished Pensacola in 1698 to ward off any incursions of the French from that direction. So when we say we're the oldest city in the United States, we mean we're the oldest permanent or continuously occupied city in the continental United States. If Puerto Rico ever gets their way and becomes a state, then we'll have the actual oldest continuously occupied city in the United States, although not continental, because San Juan was established in 1508 by Ponce de Leon, making the first governor of Puerto Rico. The funny thing about it, though, is when he established the city of San Juan, Puerto Rico, he didn't establish the city of San Juan as the city of San Juan. He established the city of San Juan as the city of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico means rich port in Spanish, and it's a port town. The island was called the island of San Juan. When we obtained it later on as U.S. territory, our government got it backwards, and it's been stuck that way ever since. Leave it to us mess it up. Oh, rather, leave it to our politicians mess it up. Nothing's changed. Now, it's amazing how many people I talk to on my ride or born and raised in Puerto Rico. You've never heard that. That's a huge part of your history. How do you not know that, right? So we're not the only ones dropping the ball on education these days. We're just the biggest culprits of it. All right, go ahead. Howdy.
Đó là Nam chê vậy. Banana này. đi con
If you look up here ahead of us to the left of the carriage, you can see a life-size statue of Ponce de Leon. An exact replica of the same statue in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where he was the first governor. Life-size because he was only supposed to be 4'11". Well, you've got a biscuit. Biscuit only knows one speed, and that's basically just as fast as he can possibly go.
ra trong này
Doc, we'll get a biscuit.
cái tiếng sai cái tiếng sai bởi vì mua cái đã thong và nốm o đây
Doc likes to trot through this light right here. I walk. Boy. Guys, any questions? Anything I might have missed?
No, it's good. You're really great.
On behalf of Doc, myself, Country Carriages, and the City of St. Augustine, we thank you for riding with us, folks.
Nó bay cho cái lũ lớn nha nụ cái thong tinh mỗi con tinh của vi hai phơi như thế tinh mà quay của vậy mùi pơ một ta cỡ quay của vi
Howdy, folks.
Thôi, lan một ly.
it, folks.
อืม
You guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys, appreciate that. Did everybody have yes? Did everybody have a happy Thanksgiving? Merry Christmas.
Yeah,
Happy New
yeah,
Year.
you too, you too. Chấm rơn, hai chấm rơn. Với tới can này. Với thôi can. Hô hô. Hình mã chưa, mày giống. Can ngày ai biết can thnom thnom.
Hello. Okay, bạn nữa. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you too. Tất nơi nào.
Thank you.
Nó bên nó chả đá nâng mốc ạ. Ra tầm mốc. Nó tầm mốc chả đá nâng mốc. Đó, chả đá nâng mốc. Nhá, nhóm phong online thôi đấy. Trên Facebook. Chạy lại không? Nó chạy nó ở cái đao, cái đó, để tập chạy lại, kèo. Con với con đao, nè bạn đã, mà. Nó để ăn về chân ấy, original. Ê, xảy xa. Lương xa nó bông ôn. Cho bật like xa. Rúi đáy.